The Lord of the Rings, arguably the greatest trilogy of all time, with its stunning effects, great cinematography, great acting, Tolkien's masterful story, jam-packed world to explore, and Peter Jackson's amazing directing.
Lord of the Rings Return of the King, still 20 years later, holds the trophy for most Oscars won in one night. In 2011, Warner Brothers released the Lord of the Rings Extended Edition for fans who protested for more.
They added 30 minutes of footage to the Fellowship of the Ring, 44 minutes to the Two Towers, and 51 minutes to the Return of the King. These additional scenes made the movie so much better by adding certain scenes to help better understand. But did you know there are still hours of unreleased footage left to be shown?
So sharpen your swords and check to see if your elven blades are blue, for we will be attacking Warner Brothers head on, where we will take a deep dive into some unreleased footage and why there should be a second extended edition of The Lord of the Rings.
Starting off, we will be talking about unreleased footage from the first movie, The Fellowship of the Ring. In the opening battle scene of the movie, called The Last Battle, there is way more dialogue and action scenes. There are more scenes of elves marching towards the battlefield, including additional dialogue from Elrond giving commands to the elves. There is also footage of the orcs we have never even seen before. Not to mention there are pictures of Elendil, the king of Gondor, having more fight scenes. The problem in the original release was that Elendil was only shown on camera about 5 times before his death, and all those times he was probably on for the length of a second, not really showing the audience that he was a true king. Only people who had read the books would have known how noble Elendil was. But adding these additional fight scenes would have helped audience see that he's a beast of a warrior. There was also one major character that was entirely cut. His name was Gil-galad. He is one of the most important elves that Tolkien has ever created. To most elves, he is considered as the High King of the Elves. Gil-galad is the character who helped create the last alliance between men and elves to go to war with Sauron. They filmed dialogue scenes, action scenes, and even a death scene where he was being choked by Sauron. The actor who played Gil-galad explained in a YouTube video that it made little sense to focus on the Elven King when he was simply going to die. Instead, the final cut made it seem like Elrond was in charge of the Elvish army.
Later on in the movie, as the Fellowship of the Ring escapes from the mines of Moria, there is supposed to be a scene where the orcs of Moria chase the Fellowship in the Lothlorien, woodland realm of the Galadriel elves. The elves of Lothlorien were meant to save the Fellowship and have a big fight scene with the orcs. You can see some of these scenes in the trailer of the movie, but they were ultimately abandoned because of time constraints. So they put in favor of an entry into Lothlorien that was shorter, focusing on setting up Galadriel and the Fellowship's suspicion of her. But if a second extended edition was in development, Warner Brothers could easily intertwine the scenes together.
Moving on to unreleased footage from The Two Towers, the second movie in the trilogy. There is a scene where Faramir has a vision. He sees Frodo as Gollum if Frodo fails to take the ring to Mordor. This scene should have been left in the original cut because it makes an interesting arc for Faramir. It makes Faramir doubt and fear whether or not he will take the ring to Gondor. It doesn't portray him as an ignorant asshole like in the original cut where he wants to take the ring to get his dad's acceptance. It lets him question more and the deadly effects it could have on his people.
Another scene that was left out of the Two Towers was the fight scene in the Glittering Caves. During the Battle of Helm's Deep, Uruk-hai warriors slip into the caves where Eowyn has to defend the women and children from the Uruk intruders. Her desire was to be in battle with the men, and this scene would add to her character arc, proving that she is more than capable of being on the battlefield. It was ultimately cut from the movie because Peter Jackson thought it would ruin the flow of the battle.
Next for unreleased footage is The Return of the King, the final in the trilogy. Near the end of the movie, at the Battle of the Black Gate, Peter Jackson originally intended to have an alternate scene where Aragorn fought Sauron.
The original thought was to have some sort of, angelic presence, which essentially was the devil in disguise. The moment where Aragorn is dismounted and they're all standing there vastly outnumbered, and this blinding bright light shines on us, which blinds, everyone except Aragorn at a certain moment sees something and walks toward it.
It was Anatar, which is a representation of Sauron as he is in his true angelic form, not in the destroyed sort of evil force that inhabits the rest of the film.
It was the form he took when he managed to fool the elves into actually creating the ring. And we thought that, okay, we've got Sauron confronted by this heir of Isildur. In a way, he's got to be feeling a bit nervous. He hasn't been able to find the ring, and he comes forward in this guise of seduction and beauty.
Then the angelic figure suddenly turns into Sauron and attacks Aragorn.
We played around with the idea that Sauron comes out and he's even bigger than he ever was before. But Pete kind of knew that those 14-foot monsters very, very, very rarely were.
It was not what Tolkien imagined, and we realised that was actually totally demeaning to what Aragorn was doing. The story was so clear as to what was happening that this was all about Frodo and Sam, and Aragorn realises if they're still alive, then he has to do what he can to help Frodo and Sam. And so Aragorn's heroism is not a one-on-one duel with the big villain. His heroism is his attempt to put his own life and the life of his troops on the line in the vague hope and dream that it somehow may give Frodo and Sam that little opportunity to help them complete their mission.
Even though this wouldn't add any new length of footage, it would be awesome for non-book readers to see what Sauron looked like under his armor. Even to see more footage of Sauron fighting in physical form would be cool to watch.
To conclude with the unreleased scenes, there was meant to be an additional epilogue of fan-favorite characters at the end of the film.
We actually shot little epilogue bits for the other characters that we never used, and I'm not using it in the extended cut either, but we did a little bit of showing what happened to Legolas, to Gimli, to Faramir and Eowyn.
Originally it was conceived as part of a montage, and then you saw Gimli in the mines below Helm's Deep, and you saw Legolas in the forest.
We actually reduced it down a lot to what it was. It was actually quite a lot longer.
Adding these scenes would give the fans a more satisfying conclusion to these characters, letting them know where these characters ended up after the War of the Ring.
There are far many more scenes we couldn't talk about due to time limits, but Warner Brothers should release all the scenes possible. Why, you ask? Because fans have been begging for 10 years. If you look at any video mentioning unreleased scenes of Lord of the Rings, people say they don't care if each movie was 10 hours long. They would still watch it. TikToker Don Marshall, also known as the obscure Lord of the Rings guy, released a campaign on March 25th called What About Second Extended Edition, where he's selling merch and using the money to buy ads to get the attention of Warner Brothers, letting them know that they can make a profit off fans who want a second extended edition.
The Lord of the Rings as a franchise has been dry lately. Even after the failed show Rings of Power, nobody seems to talk about new Lord of the Rings content in 2023. So why not give the fans some new Peter Jackson magic to talk about? Why not give them something they already love but haven't seen before? There's no risk for Warner Brothers whatsoever. They would make all the money in the world if they released a second extended edition. It's time for Warner Brothers to open their shell again and give the fans what they are hungry for. Warner Brothers, if you are watching this, please release the second extended edition.